Cinemas in 1980 were treated to a new breed of horror movies, Friday the 13th, a film about an unseen murderer who goes on a killing spree across a summer camp. Thanks to the popularity of the 1978 film Halloween, distributors were eager to snap up this film, and they were right to do so. The film was a box office success and spawned numerous sequels, some good, some bad, and some Jason X. Like Halloween and the introduction of its killer star Michael Myers, Friday the 13th established Jason Voorhees as one of Hollywood's most menacing killers, although this was done more so across the sequels. The Friday the 13th video games that would eventually emerge attempted in different ways to capture the feel of the films and the horror and suspense of the genre. Let's take a look at these attempts to bring the horror of the films into your home. Don't go out into the woods alone, because it's a video game Odyssey 4, Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th developed into a franchise thanks to a steady stream of films from 1980 onwards, and while their quality certainly varies from film to film, the iconic look of Jason Voorhees helped to maintain the reputation and popularity of it in public consciousness. The first Friday the 13th game appears in 1986, titled Friday the 13th, the computer game, released on the Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum, featuring one of the loudest title screens ever. Based partly on the second Friday the 13th film, the game itself attempts to recreate the horror and suspense of the films with a rather unique setup. You play as one of the camp counselors, and you must explore the campsite and collect weapons, because Jason is lurking nearby, and you must defeat him before he kills everyone, including you. The gameplay is fairly complex for a 1986 game, as you must protect the other counselors, collect items, and defeat Jason, meaning you have to manage your time effectively. All of these elements make this one of the first games that could fit in the survival horror genre. To keep the other counselors safe, you can pick up a cross and place it indoors to create a safe haven to send counselors when you touch them. But Jason can sometimes enter buildings and scare everyone away, so it's not really that helpful. Regarding Jason himself, he, for some reason, disguises himself as another counselor, so you have to figure out which of the counselors running about is actually Jason in disguise, which you can do if you keep track of which counselors are alive in the bottom of the screen and where they are. Or, if you want, you can just attack the counselors with your weapons and see if they transform into Jason, but this will damage and ultimately kill them, so be careful. When you do find Jason, he seems to be all dressed in black, not quite the Jason that you know. If you do manage to hunt down and destroy Jason, you'll be informed, typically, that Jason is not quite dead, and you'll have to kill him again using another camp counselor. This process continues until you have killed Jason as every counselor, and the game starts over with the first one, looping forever, so the game has no real end, and I guess Jason never fully dies, which I suppose is fairly canon. Each counselor has slightly different stats, health, and a panic meter, which fills up as time goes on and eventually kills you if it fills up completely, but it takes a lot of panic to actually kill you, and the game's time limit will expire before the panic completely overtakes you, so it's basically pointless. Health becomes an issue for some counselors, as Jason will easily kill some of them in a few hits before he can do any significant damage to him. Overall though, the game is simple enough, because all of the different mechanics of the game, such as the cross, the panic meters, are ineffectual. It's certainly a unique game full of ideas and mechanics, but it fails to add up to much other than fighting Jason and whacking him with a weapon of your choice a few times. Perhaps the most notable thing about the game is the soundtrack, from the opening scream we have mentioned, used again whenever a counselor is killed, to the music. This game has perhaps one of the most eclectic and nonsensical soundtracks in any game. Of the 7 tracks, we have some classic 8-bit renditions from composer Johann Sebastian Bach, to the Wedding March, and when we enter the barn, we are treated to, no joke, Old MacDonald Had a Farm. The differences between the Amstrad CPC and Commodore 64 versions are minimal. The two have slightly different music and colour palettes due to the capabilities of each system. The Commodore 64 version has a few very minor bugs, most notably a bug that allows you to resurrect corpses by hitting them with a weapon. The ZX Spectrum version is the worst version of the game, not only because the graphics are severely limited, but also there's no music, the indoor environments have less screens, every character is the same colour so you can't differentiate them as easily, and, most importantly, you can only attack to your right, so you must constantly reposition yourself to the left of Jason if you want to attack him. Fortunately, Jason can only attack to his right too, so you're both just constantly trying to get to the left of each other to attack. The game was quite controversial upon release, from the bloody cover, also recreated in the game's title screen, to the occasional image of someone's head being sliced by a machete whenever Jason kills a counsellor, which is apparently affected by your panic meter. The game was considered very violent. It even originally came packaged with 2 fake blood capsules for whatever reason. The game received mostly poor reviews due to a real lack of gameplay, and the iconic Jason Voorhees looking nothing like him. On a positive note, I do appreciate the attempt by the game to create a horror-like atmosphere. It just isn't executed all that well. In 1989, Friday the 13th was released exclusively in North America for the NES. It was published by LJN, famed for their acquiring of licensed properties to turn into video games that have a reputation for being a certain kind of awful. The game has some similarities with the 1986 game, in that you play as one of the camp counselors at Crystal Lake and are tasked with procuring weapons and resources to hunt down Jason. The game has a lot of mechanics and gameplay elements to get to grips with, so let's try to go over the basics. You choose one of 6 camp counselors, each having different stats, and move around Camp Crystal Lake in 2D, fighting monsters completely unrelated to the Friday the 13th franchise, including zombies, crows, bats, and wolves. Killing a certain amount of enemies will make items such as the lighter and knife spawn, allowing you to deal more damage. The lighter allows you to light fireplaces in the large cabins around the map, within which you switch to a 3D perspective to navigate. If you light all 9 fireplaces, you get a flashlight, which allows you to see in the cave, particularly where the doors are. Within the cave is the disembodied head of Pamela Voorhees, Jason's mother, and defeating her allows you to get a powerful item. This process of lighting all the fireplaces must be done with one character, and if they die, you'll have to start the process all over again. All the while this is going on, however, Jason is moving around the map also, and if he reaches a cabin where a counsellor is, you must hurry there or swap to another counsellor to fight Jason until he leaves. Similarly, when Jason heads to the house in the middle of the lake, you must go there to fight Jason before he kills 5 children and moves on to circle the map again. The aim is to hunt down resources and weapons so that you turn from being hunted by Jason to being able to hunt him. If you kill him once, you will move to the second day, where he is stronger and faster, and defeating him for a second time will move you to the third day, where he is even faster and stronger than the second day. The idea of the game, I suppose, is to equip each of the counsellors with items and weapons so that they can each fight Jason when he is near, but there just isn't enough time to go around with each counsellor to upgrade them, and you're better off just focusing on buffing one counsellor to use throughout the whole game. In particular, defeating Pamela Voorhees on the second day rewards you with her sweater, which reduces the damage you take by half, and can only be worn by one character and not transferred between them. So it's simpler to pick one character to get it and play with them. There are items in the game that appear if you jump in certain spots, such as vitamins to restore health, and keys to access the hidden cabins in the woods. But again, these can only be collected once, so you need to decide which counsellor will pick them up. The cave and forests are mazes that are easy to get lost in, and occupied with deadly enemies, but do have some useful items, so it's up to you to decide if you want to risk wandering into these labyrinths. Fighting Jason himself is also very tricky. Indoors, you must dodge his attacks by pressing down and left or right to dodge, and attack when you can. Outdoors, you must jump over his weapon attacks and again launch your own attacks. After 7 hits, Jason will run and continue following his route around the map, so you can either follow him if you're ready or move away to regroup. If Jason is at low health or you are down to your last counsellor, Jason will not flee and you'll be locked into a fight to the death. On top of everything else, the time of day changes the longer you play, and as the sun goes down, more powerful enemies start to show up. So that's another reason to not waste time. If If you're starting this game with no idea of what the game entails, you will not get very far. You need to learn everything about this game to stand a chance. Where the items spawn, Jason's route, how to navigate the caves and woods, the lot. My first time playing was very much a mess, but after a mass of researching and memorising, I was able to get through the game, and even managed to keep every counsellor alive. To do this, I primarily used Mark or Chrissy, as their run speed and jump height are top notch, and speed is everything in this game. Get a knife by killing enough zombies to get items to spawn, collect the lighter, but don't bother lighting the fireplaces as it takes too much time and is not necessary, as we shall see. In one of the cabins around the lake is a note that tells you to go to a cabin in the woods. Follow the trail of notes, picking up a key in one of its spawn points along the way, and you'll return to the first cabin where a torch will spawn, one of the most powerful weapons in the game. If Jason goes after another counsellor or children, you can swap to another counsellor and send Jason packing, since he's fairly simple to dispatch on the first day if you know how to dodge him. Leaving a cabin when you swap to a counsellor allows you to fight him outside, which is again easier. You should be grabbing any items, particularly vitamins along the way, as these will revive you if you lose all your health. For this reason, you should briefly go into the caves and woods to grab the items there, but again don't take too long. Now it's time to hunt Jason. Find where he is and follow him around the map, throwing your torch at him until he goes down, and the second day starts, where Jason returns faster and stronger. It is important to remember that each time a new day starts after you defeat Jason, all counsellors will have their health restored, so it's good to take turns chasing Jason away until you're ready to confront him with your main counsellor. At the start of the second day, you should now go to the cave proper. Without the flashlight, you can't see where the doors are to go into, but you can get around that, because the wall in the background will look slightly different where a door is that you can press up to go into, saving us wasting time flashlight hunting. Enter the cave and go left and up at the first door to find Pamela Voorhees. Defeating her again is tricky if you don't know how to dodge her attacks, but if you can defeat her, you get the sweater, which as mentioned halves your damage and will make taking on Jason quite a bit easier. You don't have to get the sweater, but if you're not perfect at dodging Jason's attacks, it's probably the safer route, even if it is a little detour. From here, you can do the same as day 1, go hunt Jason down. Day 3 is just going to require you to hunt Jason down as fast as you can. You can go back and fight Pamela Voorhees again to get the pitchfork, the best weapon in the game that does the same damage as the torch, but is faster and pierces through enemies. She is a lot faster on day 3 though, so you'll have to decide if you want to risk fighting her. Either way, go and defeat Jason again and the game will be over. The game, when released, was criticised for its difficulty, and I think that's very fair. If you spend hours learning every mechanic and item spawn, then the game is perfectly doable. I think the main problem is that Jason moves too fast and you're constantly having to intervene to save the other counsellors rather than gathering items and whatnot. If you moved slower, you would have time to do what the game wants you to, and use all of the different counsellors to equip them well. The game's flaws come from its confusing gameplay and unbalanced mechanics, but like the first Friday the 13th game, it's a unique setup that attempts to incorporate the feeling of the film and being hunted by a seemingly unstoppable killer until you can turn the tide against him. Next, we have Friday the 13th, Road to Hell, released in 2006 for mobile phones. The backstory for this one apparently is that Jason has got bored of killing teenagers and decides to take a trip to Hell to fight the creatures there for a bit of a challenge. The game is a side-scrolling beat-em-up that has you moving across the levels, slashing through the enemies that spawn on your way to Hell. There is barely any gameplay here other than just slashing through the hordes of enemies. Jason also moves so slowly through the levels, presumably just to make the game feel longer. Luckily, you have infinite lives, so you don't need to worry too much about losing all your progress. However, you can sometimes respawn right on top of enemies who kill you almost instantly and trap you in a loop of death and respawning, so you have to quickly attack these enemies when this happens to get out of it. On a positive note, the graphics are nice and the locations have some variety, but yes, overall it barely registers as a game. Strangely enough, when the license for the game expired, the developers simply re-released the game as Thursday the 12th, and has you play as Slayson instead, to avoid any copyright infringement. The next game is also a mobile game. Friday the 13th was released in 2007, and it is a point-and-click game that follows the events of the first film in a loose capacity. as you must find items and solve puzzles around Crystal Lake while the killer lurks nearby. Interestingly, the game has you play as Annie, the first counsellor who is killed at the beginning of the film, so her being alive throughout is a big change. It's not much of a game, as you can power through it in about an hour, and the puzzles can be overcome with minimal difficulty, but it is an interesting adaptation and retelling of the first film. After a long spell without any new games for the franchise, 2017 saw the release of perhaps the most recognisable Friday the 13th game for modern gamers. Built on the back of a successful Kickstarter campaign, Friday the 13th, the game, is a multiplayer survival game released for PC, Xbox One, PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch in 2019. Featuring up to 8 players in a match, one person is randomly selected to be Jason Voorhees, while the rest play as camp counsellors who must escape from Crystal Lake by fulfilling tasks such as fixing cars, radioing for help, or just letting the timer run out. You can also actually kill Jason, but this requires planning and the survivors working together to do the required steps. This is the interesting part of the game. Counsellors can choose to work together to either defeat Jason or escape, but you can also focus on surviving by working by yourself and hoping Jason goes after the others, leading to a tenuous cooperation with players that is fraught with risk, and again helps create that horror movie atmosphere of not knowing who to trust and what is going to happen next. Players who have already died also have a chance of returning to the game to play as Tommy Jarvis, the protagonist of the 4th, 5th and 6th films. He has much better stats than the other counsellors, better starting items, and is the only one capable of killing Jason if the other conditions have been met, so there's a chance to turn the tide even after death. I like that there's plenty of ways to escape or win in the game, but there's also a lot that relies on luck, such as the placement of necessary items around the map, and a lot of your experience is going to determine on who you're playing with. The game had a very rocky start with broken servers and imbalances, but the game did improve over the years, adding in new counsellors and versions of Jason from the films. Upon the announcement that the game was to be delisted from stores at the end of 2023, following license issues we'll mention later, the game upgraded every player to the maximum level of 150, and unlocked all the perks for every character, so everyone can make the most out of the game, which I think is a nice gesture. If multiplayer isn't your thing, the game does have offline play, with AI counsellors if you want to play as Jason, and a challenge mode where you are faced with different scenarios where you must pick off the counsellors in certain ways without being detected. There's also the virtual cabin, where you can wander around and learn more about the Friday the 13th franchise and the game's development. On the whole though, your enjoyment of the game is going to depend a lot on who you play with, but there's definitely potential for some fun with your friends. In 2016, the game Slayaway Camp was released, a horror puzzle game that is obviously inspired by Friday the 13th. In fact, Jason Voorhees himself appears as one of the unlockable characters. In 2018, the same developer released Friday the 13th Killer Puzzle for all major consoles, PC and mobile devices. The game consists solely of sliding puzzles. You know the ones, where you slide across the floor until you hit something, and you have to move around in specific directions to get through. Killer Puzzle bases an entire game on these puzzles. Each episode is based on a film in the Friday the 13th franchise, and with 13 levels in each episode, you've got plenty of puzzles to get stuck into. The game introduces a host of mechanics to keep the puzzles fresh and a constant challenge. However, at its core, the game is the same type of puzzle over and over, and it's probably not a game for long sessions. It's more of a game you would play on your mobile phone when you have a few minutes to do a stage or two. The majority of the puzzles are fairly balanced in terms of difficulty, and will take quite a bit of working out, but this makes them rewarding to solve. If you're truly stuck, you can ask for a hint from Mrs. Voorhees, or her head anyway, and tell you what you should do first, or she can show you the solution if you've really no idea how to proceed. You can also customise Jason, choosing from a host of appearances that he has in the films, and some he doesn't, as well as choosing a weapon to use in your killing spree, which can be unlocked through a loot crate system as you level up through solving puzzles. The appearance and weapons are purely cosmetic, so there's not much incentive to choose particular ones, it's just for fun. Overall, it's a well put together puzzle game with a good amount of depth, with enough novel mechanics that it keeps things fresh, but at its heart it is the same type of puzzle over and over, so it's probably just for short bursts when you feel like you can use your brain. And so there you have it, that's every Friday the 13th game ever released. In terms of cameos in other games, apart from Slayaway Camp that we mentioned, the Castlevania spin-off game Kid Dracula had a boss that resembles Jason Voorhees. And the protagonist of the Splatterhouse games similarly resembles Jason too. Jason Voorhees is also available as a DLC character for Mortal Kombat 10, which is a perfect fit for him to dismember and butcher people with his familiar moves.
Jason Voorhees.
While there were no licensed Friday the 13th games between 1989 and 2017 apart from the mobile releases, there are quite a few fan games that were released through this time, a few of which are worth a mention, even if these videos only count licensed games. Friday the 13th 3D is a game that has you play as Jason, going around killing unsuspecting teens with whatever weapons you can find. Friday the 13th Return to Camp Blood again has you slaughtering people as Jason, and there's even a D-Make version for the NES. Crystal Lake is a Game Boy style game that has you defend Crystal Lake from the evil creatures of hell that are invading, and only you, as Jason Voorhees, can stop them. The popular fighting game Terrordrome: Rise of the Boogeymen, which has a host of killers and creatures from famous horror movies, unsurprisingly features Jason as a playable character. So what does the future of the Friday the 13th franchise hold? The whole franchise itself is in a state of limbo at the moment, with the rights to the franchise being contested, and all licenses for the games have expired, leading to Killer Puzzle being removed from stores and Friday the 13th the game suffering the same fate, with the latter having an unreleased DLC pulled from release. One thing is for sure though, is that Jason never truly dies, so make sure to lock the doors to your cabin because you never know who's lurking in the woods. Thanks for checking out this video game Odyssey for Friday the 13th. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel, it really helps. You can also support the channel on Patreon, check me out on Twitch, where playthroughs of all the games featured here are kept. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you for the next Video Game Odyssey.